Charbagh. We are delighted to introduce the final session at Charbagh for this year, session number 179, Examining Faith, sponsored by the Aga Khan Foundation. The festival brochure with full brochure is available for purchase. Distinguished Supreme Court advocate and politician here with us today, the author of Examining Faith, Mr. Salman Khurshid, in conversation with journalist, filmmaker and author Revati Laul, Professor of Economics at IIM Ahmedabad Rakesh Basant, writer and human rights and peace worker and activist Harsh Mander, in conversation anchored and moderated by journalist and author Sagarika Ghose. Please welcome the panel on stage with a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with four people who have three people who've written extremely insightful books on the subject which we are examining this afternoon, which is examining faith and looking at the situation in which we find ourselves, which is a time of religious majoritarianism, a time when the word Muslim makes many people in the ruling establishment very angry and very agitated, a time when minority rights are under threat and under challenge. I believe this is a very, very important panel to discuss the idea of India and the idea of minority rights, the idea of pluralism, that pluralism in India is a union of faiths and not an obliteration of religion and religious faith. And of course, Professor Basant here was on the Sachar committee and will shed light on his findings in that committee. So before we proceed to the discussion, I'm going to ask each of you to talk a little bit about your book, and then we will proceed to the interactive session. So starting with you, Mr. Khurshid, why don't you speak a little about your very, very impressive book on the triple talaq judgment, and then we will go to the others as well.
Thank you very much. I know that this subject is very vast, and you could get lost in general ideas. But let me just put it in perspective. My book simply says how the Supreme Court decided the issue of triple talaq. And let me just make it clear that the Supreme Court said clearly there is no such thing as triple talaq. They arrived at it from various directions, but there is no such thing as triple talaq, so it's gone, finished, over. But that message hasn't got to the government. Government thinks they still has to do something to abolish triple talaq. But one very quick point about talaq, it has to be seen in the perspective of, do we want unhappy marriages to continue, or do we want people who can't live together to part as painlessly and quickly as possible? Yes, keeping in mind that traditionally and historically, the woman partner is worse off in any case, and therefore you must provide protection for the woman. When people say triple talaq is bad, they forget that talaq is almost instantaneous even if said once. If you say talaq, that's divorce. But talaq, saying talaq is not enough. It has to be a procedure and a process of reconciliation before talaq can kick in. And therefore, there must be a manner in which you have to go to an adjudicating authority to say, I've done what I need to do and I now want a talaq. And talaq is not just for the man. A woman has an equivalent of a talaq called khula. It's a no-fault divorce system given 1400 years ago. A woman can go and say, I don't want to live with this man anymore. Give me the terms and conditions on which we can part. That's similar to talaq. Now, what triple talaq does is, it takes away the right of a man to give talaq, take it back 3 times or twice in a lifetime. And if you say this instantly, then the chance of reconciling and taking the wife back or getting the marriage back on track is gone. That's all triple talaq does. Otherwise, triple talaq is no different from talaq to all practical purposes. So it's a demonizing of something which is actually very progressive, which was very far-sighted 14 years ago, and that could be fine-tuned further, but they've demonized it to such an extent that it seems like you're doing something horrible. If the government wanted to step in, all it had to do is to say, a woman deserted with or without talaq or divorce will be protected. But you know that the government would find it difficult to suggest any such thing.
Just to ask a question, I found your book absolutely fascinating because you also mentioned that you examined the question of whether the court overreached itself in interfering with the freedom of religion and interfering with the freedom of religion that is guaranteed within the Constitution in trying to adjudicate on personal law. You believe in your book that the personal laws that exist within a community must be reformed. There's no question about that if they happen to oppress or they happen to carry with them gender injustice. But then at the same time, the Constitution of India also provides for a plurality of religious identities. And if I may ask you, did you believe that in some ways the diktat that emanated not just from the court, but also the way the government brought in the ordinance was in fact interfering with religious identity rather than erring on the side of gender justice?
Well, let's just be clear that the Constitution provides for protection of faith.
Yes.
The only problem is there's a faith and there is an extra faith. What is the core faith, whichever be the religion, Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, or Islam or Christianity? Who would then decide what are the contours of faith? Will it be done by court or by somebody else? Now, the court is the only institution we have that can do it, but obviously the court needs to fall back on scholarship, on people from that religion itself, and then make a clear demarcation between what is the core area of religion and what are practices associated with may not be a core area. And I think triple talaq was one such area. It was not part of the core religion of Islam. It was something which was added on historically for various reasons and could be removed without in any way hurting Islam. But that doesn't mean that gives the court the right to say, we will outlaw faith completely, because then you'll have a faithless constitution.
Yes, and ours is not a faithless constitution.
And ours is not a faithless constitution.
Ours is a union of religions and not an obliteration of religion. I think you make that point very well in your important book. Harsh, Mander has written a remarkable book as well, looking at the instances of majoritarian violence and the manner in which minorities are being assaulted on a daily basis in India. Do tell us a little bit more.
So my newest book, the title is Partitions of the Heart. And I talk about, there was one partition 70 years ago in the land. A new partition is being constructed in our hearts and minds, each one of us. And it is that partition which is going to be much more profound in its impact. And the subtitle is Unmaking the Idea of India. And I think that we've used the word idea of India a lot of times, but every second Indian is below the age of 25, and they need to understand what that idea of India was and is and must remain. That this will be a country that belongs equally to all, regardless of which God you worship, or if you worship no God, regardless of your caste, your gender, your wealth, your language. You are an equal citizen of this country in every single way. And what drove me to write this book most of all is what has happened over these last few years, where we've seen a continuous decline in social relations. I don't think India has ever been as divided, and particularly our Muslim brothers and sisters living with as much fear, everyday normalized fear in their hearts, as we see today after Mahatma Gandhi's death. And I think that all of us need to take responsibility. They're politically isolated, they're socially alone. But the worst manifestation, which a lot of my book deals with, is this rising phenomenon of lynching. And as part of what we call the Karwan Mohabbat, or the caravan of love, over the last 15 months, I've made about 25 journeys to the families affected by lynching in 13 states of the country. And every journey shows extraordinary levels of hate, where completely irrationally people kill people in the name of a rumor of cow or love jihad, mutilate their bodies, smash their genitals. The families, and we don't even, and the police registers cases in almost all of these cases against the victim rather than the accused. And most frightening of all, there's very little compassion in local communities from the majority community. And I think that all of us need to reclaim a society built upon love, respect, and inclusion.
And I think the really remarkable aspect of Harsh's work is that, you know, he doesn't do what so many of us do, which is consent in advance to violence and consent in advance to tyranny. Harsh has refused to consent. Harsh has refused to give his agreement to anything that is done in his name, which is against the constitutional ideals of India. And I think that is a remarkable civic resistance to tyranny and to majoritarian violence that really should be lauded. Harsh, I wanted to as well ask you, when you went on these journeys with Karwan-e-Mohabbat, did you feel that there was hope of changing people's minds? And this relates to Revati's book. When you came across these communities, did you sense complete isolation, or did you feel there was hope? There could be bridge building between communities?
You know, I'm a very optimistic person, and until these recent years, I used to believe that India is a country where whatever we might do, love and humanity will prevail. I'm losing bit by bit that hope, and I don't want to lose it completely. Just because we are in Rajasthan, I'll answer that question with, you know, I can tell you hundreds of examples. Just Rajsamund, not very far from here. 25th anniversary of the Babri Masjid, 6th December last year. One man decided that I am going to do a performative killing of a Muslim. He gets his 14-year-old nephew.
The axe murder.
Yeah, the axe murder. A 14-year-old nephew is prepared with his camera, and he has to call a Muslim, and so he calls a circular migrant from Bengal who you can call. He comes, and within 15 seconds, you see the video which the boy has taken. He takes instruments, he bludgeons him to death, he hacks him into pieces, he puts petrol and sets him on fire, and the boy is still, his hand is as steady as if it is on a tripod. And more frightening even than what I saw was the idea that the boy could see, and then he gives this harangue. We went back, you know, to find out, you know, within 2 or 3 days. I met the family of the person who done the killing, Shambhulal Regar. And he had lost his livelihood, apparently. He used to be in the marble business. He lost it due to demonetization. Instead of being angry with whoever he should have been angry with, he turned his anger against Muslims and became obsessive about it, and he thought he'd do this performative violence. But what was most terrifying to me was actually that no one in that city has reached out to the people who were being attacked. Even in the worst riots that I have seen in Gujarat, and as a civil servant, the 1984, etc., which I've handled, there were always more Hindus who saved lives than those who killed them in the worst of times. You're seeing that dry up. I could not find anybody who's reached out in almost any site, and as I said, I've made these 25 journeys. Something we have to understand, where has our compassion gone, and our silences. Those of us who are not, you know, who are silent, you can have only 3 reasons for your silence. The first is, you know, I'm frightened to speak, and there's some fear. The second is, I don't care, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Dalit, I'm not a Christian, it's not going to happen to me. But the third and the most frightening to me is that somewhere in my heart, actually, I share the same sentiments of hate. And I've outsourced my hate to the mob. The mob is doing it. I'm not really unhappy that it is happening. The community had it coming. And we are seeing now that the mob is now outsourcing its hate to the police in many of these cases. So I think, you know, I start my book with 2 lines, and I'll just finish with that. And that is that there are moments in history when later generations are going to ask you, what did you do at that time? And I think we are passing through one such moment in history. And each of us need to ask ourselves, what did we do? What are we doing at this time to counter hate, to counter what is happening to our brothers and sisters?
That's wonderfully said, and I think the person who is staring at bigotry in the face, who is confronting it and looking at it in the eye and staring it down is Revati Laul in her book Anatomy of Hate, where she bravely and actually in a searing gaze, writes the stories of the 3 perpetrators of violence in the Gujarat riots of 2002 and the way in which they justify their hatred and their killing and their violence and the kind of mindsets they have. Revati, tell us a little about your book.
Yeah, actually taking off from what both of you have said, I was disturbed as a journalist in 2002 when I went to Gujarat for NDTV, where I was working at the time. And everywhere I went, I encountered the same question where people said, "Aapko samajh mein nahi aayega, humne bawal ka support kyun kiya?" Bawal is the word that the Gujaratis used to describe riot, but it was actually a genocide because it was only Muslims that were being killed. And what I wanted to understand was, how is it that a whole state or a large section of the Hindu middle class in Gujarat has all said to themselves, this is okay, or either participated or actively supported this? So what has happened to faith? What has made the everyday person go out there and do what one of my protagonists, Suresh, one of the 3 people who I've tracked in the book, go out there, cut up a fetus of a pregnant woman in the streets of Narora Patia, kill her, and then many years later brag about it, because all this violence, let's not kid ourselves, is performative. The whole point of it is, yes, the whole...
To his wife.
No, he bragged about it to his wife, but he also bragged about it on camera, saying, I pulverized Muslim women till they turned, till they were pickled.
It's like creating a spectacle.
So the spectacle, so what I needed to ask myself is, instead of this wrenching kind of, oh my God, this is happening, that's not productive beyond a point. If you just keep saying, oh shit, again this has happened, what are we actually really doing? So what I felt it was important to do is to look at where this anger and violence comes from. And when I unpacked the stories of these 3 people from very different parts of Gujarat, who were in different sections of the mob in different districts, and came from very different backgrounds, I found that it was possible for me to step into their shoes, not empathize with them, but it was possible by the end of the research and the writing for me to say, okay, I can now understand the circumstances that led to the creation of this violence. And if we don't do that, it's like, even if you look at a microcosm, when you look at a dead body of a normal murder on the street in any day, do you understand anything by looking at the body? No, you have to look at the person who killed, right? But we have obliterated the idea of looking at violence in the face or looking at the mob, because somewhere it implicates all of us. So we have this amnesia, and right now the reason why 2002 was the fulcrum which galvanized the politics of hate from Gujarat, from the margins of Gujarat to the center stage of Gujarat, and then to the center of India. Why? Are we a society that feeds on fantasies of hate? Is this the reason why we attack each other on Twitter all the time? Is this the reason why we take out a gun on the street and kill someone for parking wrong? But the larger question is, there is this false equivalent that is often drawn in faith, saying that 2002 happened in the same way that 1984 happened, which was the anti-Sikh riots. But I want to say that that's a false equivalent that we keep drawing, because ever since the partition, all the violence has been Hindu versus some community. Hindu versus Sikh, Hindu versus Christian, Hindu versus Muslim. And they're not all the same. Because when it's Hindu versus Muslim, it goes back into the original sin on which the idea of India and Pakistan were both created. We keep saying we're a secular country, but we actually forget. Us saying it are people who come from a reading, writing society. We are not, as a rule, a normative society. We don't live by rules. We very happily call that jugaad, but what it really means is we toss out the constitution, we toss out the elections, we toss out the rule of law. So actually, even when we're talking about say how religion is prescribed in the Quran or the Hadith or in the Rig Veda or the Upanishads, that is very far removed from the way it's practiced. The way it's practiced ever since independence has been violence and Hindu majoritarian violence. We are a Hindu majoritarian society. So what we need to do is to break this down into the everyday, the way that has been done in revisionist history of Nazi Germany, where, say, someone like Hannah Arendt looked at Nazi Germany and she wrote the banality of evil, right? The ordinariness. Well, how does this break down into the everyday? What, for instance, makes one of my protagonists, a Bhil from a poor tribal part of Gujarat, go and burn houses of Muslims down? It immediately escalates him. It changes his political station in life. It changes his money drastically. It changes his social status. Before that, he was a marginalized farmer living barely subsistence level farming. And we keep saying, oh, go get an education, then you won't be so violent. He had a bachelor's degree in the middle of tribal Gujarat as a Bhil, which was very unusual. The rest of his siblings dropped out of class 4 or 5. Why did this person who I've renamed in the book as Dungar, why does he still gravitate towards the Sangh Parivar? Because despite the bachelor's degree, he was working for 30 rupees a day as construction labor. So if we want this violence to change, we have to look at what is it that we're giving people in these places as levers of upward mobility. If their only levers for upward mobility is the politics of religious violence, then that is what they will use. And we have to change what else is available to people if we want them to not gravitate towards this and fantasize about this as a society.
That's so well said. You know, somebody once told me when I was covering the riots of this was the Ayodhya time, that udyog nahi hai, par nafrat ka udyog hai. So I just want to ask you, one of the features that I picked up on people driven by hate is that they have a tremendous sense of victimhood, that they are the victims. We are victims of Islamic aggression. We are victims of Muslims. Muslims are threatening us. Muslims are threatening our women. And therefore, we must attack Muslims when those threats can be completely illusory. Did you find this in the protagonists that you interviewed, that they had a sense of victimhood, that they were being evil and they were killing because they felt we are victims of Muslims? And I keep asking them, कहाँ है मुसलमान, कहाँ आपको मुसलमान क्या कर रहे हैं आपको, क्या आपका ज़मीन हड़प रहे हैं, क्या आपका नौकरी छीन रहे हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं आपको, क्या प्रॉब्लम है आपको मुस्लिम से? जैसे नहीं हमको प्रॉब्लम है, वो हमारा ये किया वो किया. So did you sense that victimhood?
Absolutely, and this again goes back into the partition and the stories, the diet of hate that we've built around us and them, Hindus versus Muslims, ever since then. It has nothing to do with reality, but perceptions never do. You know, I can have fantasies about Amitabh Bachchan. It has nothing to do with reality. So hate, especially the politics of hate, has actually very little to do with what's happening on the ground. It's a self-propitiating mechanism that stems from 2 or 3 things. The one biggest identifiable cause that I found in all my protagonists is that they were fed on a popular culture of hate growing up. And we live in these separate ghettoized communities in rural and urban India, where there was no interaction with Muslims. No, there was no actual interaction with Muslims. So therefore, they could believe whatever they wanted to. One of the characters in my book undergoes a complete transformation. He goes from being an almost fanatic at the edge of the mob to a left liberal atheist in the course of this period of 40 years that I'm describing. And that, to me, was actually the most surprising, because what we end up thinking of this hate as one fixed ball, as one monolith, but actually it's not, because we're not a normative, we're not a reading-writing society, we don't take anything seriously, not even violence, not even the Sangh. So we're actually dissing the same people that we pretend to prescribe to. And in this case, this man actually was a student. He was finishing his master's in social science, and the violence happened. So he went around with his friends saying, "अरे देखना चाहिए यार, बाटा की दुकान मुसलमान ने छोड़ दिया है और उसकी दुकान तो free जूते मिल रहे हैं." You know, so he was doing this, but then after the violence was over, he was looking for a job, and the only job he could find with a social science degree in middle Gujarat was in an NGO that was rehabilitating the very people whose death and destruction he was cheering on for. And that's when the cookie slowly started to crumble.
Yeah, that's a very hopeful arc that you draw in the book, actually.
So what actually made me want to write this book is meeting this man who I call Pranav in the book. I had not imagined that it was possible to change. And by writing of hate is fixed, I was fixing it as a journalist. So I was guilty of actually being part of this matrix, you know?
But it's really a remarkable journeys that you've chronicled. Professor Rakesh Basant, you of course were part of the Sachar committee, which was this comprehensive report on the state of India's Muslims and the state of the Muslim community. Tell us a little bit about your work in the Sachar committee and the facts and figures that you discovered.
Thank you. I was part of the Sachar committee as an economist, and I am a data person. And while we empathize with everything that has been said, and we have been doing certain things in Gujarat, post and pre-riots, I would just share with you a few facts which should break many of the myths which create this kind of victimhood, create this kind of hate, which create this notion of otherness.
Or the notion of Muslim appeasement.
And Muslim appeasement. So the report has very clearly showed that the conditions of Muslims in India is poorer, if not, is almost equal to, if not worse than the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Whether you look at poverty levels, their level of wealth, or you look at education levels, employment in organized sector, and so on. So in terms of conditions of work, conditions of employment, conditions, living conditions, Muslims are much worse than even STs and SCs in certain regions. So to say that they have been appeased for a long, long time and they have benefited from various programs while the others have not is completely baseless in terms of data. I would, in the context of what has been said, I'll just share with you 2 or 3 things which can break some of these myths. And unfortunately, these things have not been picked up well enough. One of the arguments has been that the madrasas create people who go out and do certain violent acts. And all the Muslims go to madrasas and they get trained and they are told certain things and they go out and do certain things which they were not supposed to be doing. Now, if you look at the data on Muslim children who are going to madrasas, if you go by these arguments, one would expect everybody is going to madrasas. But if you look at the proportion of people or children who are in the school-going age group, say between 6 and 18, the proportion of children who go to madrasas for dunyavi talim, not dini talim more people go, is close to only 5% at the national level. Some states have more proportion, a higher proportion, but at the national level, only 4.5% of school-going age group children among Muslims go to madrasas. The rest of them go to regular schools, and more likely they will go to the regular government schools because they don't have the capacity to go to a private school. So that's one myth clearly broken. The other thing which links to the idea about personal law, Triple Talaq is the book which is being focused on. If you look at the sex ratio of population among Muslims, sex ratio is number of women to number of men in the population. The sex ratio among Muslims is much better than all other communities in our country. What does it tell us in terms of the status of women in that part of our society? If you look at the infant and child mortality rates, that is the number of children, infants and children that is below 5 years who die in number of 1,000 childbirths, you will once again find that the infant and child mortality rates are much lower among Muslims than among other groups, and they have been falling much faster, right? If you look at birth weights, if you look at the weight of the mother at the time of childbirth, they are much better when you look at Muslims as compared to others. And mind you, this is a situation when they are much poorer. They are not as well educated. They don't have all the resources which the others have. So if you start looking at these facts, the perspective on Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao changes completely, because you have a group of people within the country who are doing a much better job of saving their daughters, and they're also doing a much better job of providing nutrition, given the resources that they have, to their women, so that their children live longer, or they don't die below 5 years. So what I would suggest is, I mean, I am very passionate about the Structure Committee report. Read the report and decide for yourself whether the majority group in our country should feel victimized, whether the majority in our country should feel that a particular group is being appeased. I'll stop here. I mean, I have lots of stories to tell about data, but I'll come back to that.
Let's double back to that. I think that's very, very important. You know, we have to look at the facts. We need to ground ourselves in facts and figures, because the enemy of spectacle is only fact. If we don't have truth, if we don't have fact, we then are hostage to spectacle and to untruth and to political fiction. So we have to stay grounded in fact, because without fact, there can be no rule of law. Without fact, there can be no democracy. I want to come to now the various themes that I've delineated, and it's getting all very telescoped because we're up against time. But I just want to address to you the question of, you know, what Professor Basant was saying about Muslim appeasement. And you know, there is this myth that Muslims are being appeased, too much is being done for Muslims, Muslims are given affirmative action. You address this in your book, and you say that the Congress has been unfairly accused of Muslim appeasement. But how would you respond to this, the accusation that the Congress party bends over backwards trying to appease Muslims, the Shah Bano judgment which you have written about, the ban on Salman Rushdie also which you've written about, that these are the reasons why there is Hindutva upsurge, because precisely the Congress party is appeasing Muslims, therefore we have to do Hindutva assertion because the Congress is a Muslim party?
Well, this is a conversation that can never end.
Yeah.
Periodically we get accused of supporting soft Hindutva and therefore deserting Muslims. But others continue to accuse us of appeasement of Muslims. For me, there is a simple question. If the Congress party had appeased Muslims, why did the Muslims desert the Congress party? I mean, that's a question that nobody's ever answered. The regional parties in my part of the country, in UP for instance, they survive on the vote of Muslims who've deserted the Congress party. Now, whether that's legitimate or illegitimate is a political question. But the fact remains that if we were appeasing them, they would not have deserted us. They've deserted us because they have some serious questions about our conduct. Again, it may not be right, it may be exaggerated, but frankly, they do question us on certain things about our conduct. And therefore, what the Structure Committee was to do, I believe, was the first time in the history of our nation that the Structure Committee addressed Muslims. It wasn't minorities, it was Muslims. And it was people who were not Muslims who were saying that. It was people who were not Muslims who were actually saying on basis of facts that there is something wrong and we need to correct it. I think what went wrong was the presentation of Structure in a manner in which it seemed like we were trying to offer a partisan document to the Muslims. And Muslims received it in a manner in which they said, well, it may be a partisan document, but it doesn't go far enough. So there was a complete political failure, as it were. We were being accused by one side saying they're only concerned about Muslims. We were being accused by others by saying, what have you done? You haven't done anything. You didn't give us the reservations that you promised. And therefore, what are you talking about?
But the charge made against your party is that, you have patronized the various regressive elements within the Muslim community, the Maulanas and the Jama Masjid, various the heads of faith, the Shahi Imams, the Maulanas, and the ordinary Muslim, the indigent Muslim, the unemployed Muslim, the backward Muslim has not got the attention she deserves simply because you are patronizing only the Maulanas and the fatwa givers.
Well, that may well be true. It's not entirely true, but there are perceptions that some of these people in politics, we call them thekedars. You know, that you can get a contractor, you can get a thekedar, and he'll deliver everything to you. But politics has changed. It doesn't happen that way anymore. And if there are people who are seemingly icons of a community, it would be a very bad mistake on our part to hope that the icons will deliver. Sachar committee was different, but unfortunately, Sachar committee was also presented by the other side as though we were doing the same thing. So they found no difference between Sachar and the bearded Maulana. But Sachar was really a scientific, modern, transparent, and an egalitarian attempt to provide opportunity to everyone. That includes Muslims.
Right, and I think that brings us to the next point, because I know that Harsh has written an article actually when Sonia Gandhi said that she doesn't want the Congress to be perceived as a Muslim party. And I know you wrote that article in the Indian Express. But I also want to come down to the visible and invisible manifestations of discrimination. And Harsh, where are we going to go if politicians are manufacturing discrimination? If politicians are bhadkawing people and saying, हमारे 5 आपके 25, कब्रिस्तान, शमशान, पाकिस्तान चले जाओ, पाकिस्तान में पटाखे बजेंगे अगर हम बिहार में नहीं जीते. If politicians are speaking the language of hate, then what can citizens do? I mean, the mass of citizens may be decent and plural, but if politicians are speaking hate, then what are we? How can we push back?
See, politicians are speaking hate because they believe that it is going to give them votes. The only way we can push back is to say we will not vote for a Yogi Adityanath who has constituted a private militia which still stands, called the Hindu Vahini, of people who are armed and full of hate. We are not going to accept leaders who spout hate. I think we're seeing this normalization of hate that right from, and I must say, from the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, during his period in Gujarat, never used to hesitate. When they didn't set up relief camps after 2002, he said, I don't want to set up baby-producing factories. Hum 5, hamare 25. These were the kinds of discourse, and I was there those many years. He's been more restrained after he came to power, but the pink revolution somewhere, Bangladeshis will have to be packed off, and something else in Kabristan, etc. But his chosen lieutenants from Amit Shah onwards and Yogi Adityanath undertake hate speech of a scale that should send them all to jail under the laws of the land, which doesn't happen. And as far as the Congress is concerned, I wrote this article, and I'd like to say, the Congress, I think, has swung from one end where there was never an appeasement of Muslims. And I feel, if I was a Muslim, I'd feel, doubly shortchanged, because first you're saying that I've been appeased, and then you've done nothing for me. And Sachar is a committee, is the evidence of that. There has been only an appeasement of communal elements of both Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Sikhs in the policy of the Congress and of many other parties through independence, whether it was Bhindranwale or whoever. So I think that there has been appeasement, continuously political appeasement of communal elements, and that is something that we have to push back on. But the Congress today, and I wrote that article because I see that right through the election campaign in Gujarat or in the last the three states, the Congress has been so careful not to be seen with Muslim faces, not to talk about lynching, not to go to Alwar and say, this is where Pehlu Khan was lynched, this is where Rakbar Khan was lynched. We stand against hatred. And to go back, and I just end with that, just think of Mahatma Gandhi. 1 million people had died. 1 million people had died in Hindu-Muslim riots in 1947. And a new country had been constituted on the basis of religion. Rivers of blood were flowing. Trainloads of people had come with so much anger. And he still stood up and said, no, India will still be a country that belongs equally to people, Hindu and Muslim. And Hindus and Muslims are like my two eyes, and I cannot separate them. And I think we need to get that courage. And if the Congress party doesn't show us that courage, then we have to find it in ourselves, and we have to demand it from them.
I think that's a very well put point. I can't resist, being a political journalist, putting this to Salman Khurshid. Why is the Congress so pusillanimous in actually going to the victims of lynching, going to the people who have been killed, going to the people who have been slaughtered and standing with them shoulder to shoulder? And do you have a problem with your party in its timidity? It seems as if the Hindutva wave has really hillowed you. You are also trying to be Hindutva. You don't know whether you're soft Hindutva. You're also a Shiv Bhakt or a Ram Bhakt or some other Bhakt. Why don't you stand for the values you believe in? And like Harsh is saying, go to the victims of injustice.
Sadly, my book is not out in time for the festival. But next year, it's called The Invisible Citizen, and Harsh figures in that book, his arguments figure in that book in some detail. But this is a very, very tough dilemma for us. A lot of people believe...
But why should it be tough? It's a matter of conscience.
No. There are two things. There is ideology and your faith and belief in what is right. And there is political strategy. Now, if we are getting hammered again and again for telling the truth, saying that we are silent should not be taken as supporting those who don't tell the truth. The problem is in a democracy, it's a matter of balancing strategy and ideology. You have to do it.
Salman, you're losing because you have compromised with your ideology. Not because of your ideology, but because of your compromise with the ideology.
You can never be the B team of the... you're just the B team of the BJP then.
We cannot be the BJP and we will not be the BJP.
But then you're becoming the B team of the BJP.
Please understand, when we tell everybody, could you stand up together so that we can find the BJP? People are still thinking of, can we cut Congress down here? Can we bring Congress down a little bit? Can we reduce Congress in its stature, etc.? It is a difficult democratic dilemma in this country today. It's not just simply sitting here and saying, well, now just do the right things, say the right things, and you're fine. I am saying this because I fight elections. I'm saying this because I have to go and seek votes. And when I seek votes and the things that I have to hear because my party has taken up a particular position is not easy. Now, you don't desert your ideology, you don't desert your commitment, but you do have to fine-tune strategy. And if you don't fine-tune strategy, none of us will be here 2 years from now talking about all this.
But then everything is political strategy. Where is rule of law?
I want to express what I've seen on the ground in living in Gujarat amongst people from the mob these last 4 years and what the Congress has done in terms of fine-tuning strategy. I met a man from the mob who sat across a dhaba, drinking chai and having pakoras and told me, I'm responsible for killing 10 people in 2002. He was a Congress Panchayat member, and the person who gave him a ticket is someone I know who said, yes, I know he's done that, and I've given him a ticket. This is the kind of appeasement the Congress is also doing and has to stop doing. They gave a ticket to Praveen Togadia's brother, the originator of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad. So if this is what's happening in Gujarat, no wonder the Muslims of Gujarat are deserting the Congress party en masse. They are scared. So they are actually being forced into an absolutely cruel and almost apartheid-like silence. They are living in rehabilitation colonies where they don't have land pattas after being displaced from 2002 till now. So they can't get ration cards, they can't get voter IDs. They are stateless, identityless people. And the reason that both parties or every single party is doing this because saffron is the new normal, and we, the voters, have to ask ourselves, is this what we want? And yes, it is what we want. It's what we want that has to be to change.
But it also comes down to, Revati, how politicians, formulate public policy and future public policy and manifestos. And to Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, as I've written, you must say Jai Insan. Jai Insan has to be your motto, that without humanity, without Insan, what does strategy matter? What do values matter? I just want to...
See, the problem today, honestly, and I'm telling you this deep from my heart, saying Jai Insan is not a problem. And we are saying it all the time.
No,
the problem is when the Insan begins to suffer, to be standing right next to him is the problem. And therefore, this is a cooperative exercise that has to be done by the Congress party and many people who are not necessarily connected with political parties, but who believe that India is under threat. It has to be a cooperative understanding between Congress party and those people. And I believe that that's what's happening here. The kind of discussion that's happening is what is
Informal
engendering.
discussions are very important. And I just want to quote to you the views of Mr. Narayan Murthy, which I think are very educative. Mr. Narayan Murthy once told me that I'm a very religious person. I'm extremely religious in my personal beliefs, but when I'm in public, I perform no religious rituals. And that is my advice to all politicians. Do whatever you want to do in the home, in the public, no religious rituals, which is why I wish Rahul Gandhi would stop trying to be a Shiv Bhakt and a Ram Bhakt and whatever Bhakt he's trying to be. But let me come to you, Professor. As Salman Khurshid is saying, as Harsh is saying, as Revati is saying, the fact is, we have to get the facts out. We have to disseminate the real information. Now, when we have the mine of information that we have in Sachar, how are we going to get this report out? What ways are there by which we can disseminate this report? How are you thinking of innovative ways to reach the citizenry?
Actually, that is my biggest disappointment, because when I joined the Sachar committee, I didn't know what will happen to it politically. I mean, politically, I'm quite naive. But what I hoped was that once we bring all these facts together, people who are sitting here, the civil society, the NGOs, they will put out this message. I mean, they talked about Hamare 5, Unke 25. If you look at the adoption of family planning practices, there's not much difference. And the difference has been narrowing over a long period of time. So all these simple facts can potentially be used by political parties as well. To my mind, when the Sachar committee report came and the opposition parties started to use it as a mechanism to say that Congress is trying to do this for Muslims, and Congress should have looked at the report and said, whatever recommendations are there, they are for all the marginalized. They are not only for Muslims. And their response should have been, yes, the focus was on Muslims, but all the recommendations are for all the marginalized, whether they are women or Dalits and so on, a large variety of issues there. But what they did instead was to put it in the Minority Affairs Department, the implementation of that. See, the issue of Muslims or Dalits, it's a much larger issue, and it has to be seen in a much larger context. And to my mind, the only mechanism is to share facts and counter. Media is there. I believe BJP has a much better hold on media than other things, but you have to come back to facts. And a young person, if you keep talking to him, I hope you will be able to convince him that all these beliefs that you have are based on myths. They are not facts at all. And of course, this is a reasonably large gathering, but it is very difficult to communicate that effectively by an academic like me. I can keep on writing papers, nobody reads them. So that job has to be done by all the progressive or liberal people in this country.
And what ideas, just before we turn it over to the audience, what ideas does the Congress have to make secularism a living, breathing reality and to project it in a way that the Congress has so far not been able to do, in the sense of how it can empower the good within, how it can actually empower civil society, as you just said. You know, do you feel in some senses we should return to Gandhi and the Gandhian learning of winning over hearts and minds and not rely so much on state action and legal discourse? But, you know, Gandhi placed a lot of store on dialogue, talking to people, reaching out, civil society, mass awakening with people through dialogue. I think that's what's missing. You know, we're getting too lost in state action and legal diktats, which only puts people's backs up and makes a backlash happen. But do you believe that there is need for a lot more dialogue, a lot more conversation, real conversation with people to make secularism a living, breathing reality that people can profit from?
Well, I can tell you very clearly that Congress today is determined to reach out for dialogue in a major way. Our manifesto is being prepared on the basis of dozens of conversations that we've had across the country. But I will be honest to you, and I will admit to you that dialogue about secularism is not the easiest thing that we find today. We have a problem. We have a problem. And when you mention Gandhi, I have to retort by saying we need, in our generation and our age, we need the courage of Gandhi turning away from the national movement after Chauri Chaura. But the trouble here is when you are in the business of fighting and winning and losing elections, you forget that there is an option that Gandhi had, which was that independence can wait, but non-violence cannot wait.
No, that's very worrying. Then are you saying that electoral democracy is damaging the constitution?
There is a problem. There is a problem about electoral democracy, and therefore we all need to work together on it. That's all I'm saying.
Salman, there are moments in history when there's something more important than winning elections, and that is saving the soul of the country. And I think the Congress has to have that conviction, and I'm convinced that if it does, it will also win the elections.
I want to just quickly come to another point, which I want to address to Revati, which I think will make sense to the younger audience. You know, the role of social media. We're spending so much time raging on the internet to strangers. And I keep pleading with people who I talk to that don't rage on the internet alone sitting in a dark room. Get out there, talk to real people and have real conversations. Would you say that the social media is really fueling this hate and this echo chamber? And did you come across people who are, propagating these viral videos, the video that Harsh talked about, the axe murder of Raj Samant, that these viral videos and this kind of social media dissemination of hate, that is another enemy now which is opened up. Social media is becoming a serious threat, I believe, to liberal democracy.
Well, there are two things. Firstly, the people I focused on don't read and write. And I feel that a lot of the prescriptive measures that we're saying, talk to people, read reports, people don't read the papers, forget reports. The people that are out there in the social media also come largely from the space of where they can barely write 180 characters on Twitter and will only read that and nothing else.
They will read the 100
tweets. That's it. They're not people who read. So actually, the measures that we really need to focus on is working with people who are already in spaces of violence. And working in violence is actually a very sexy thing. It allows you, it's very cathartic to take out your anger on someone. Not just, by the way, on Twitter, because the same people are also forming lynch mobs. So it's not just distant. It's not just the convenience of saying something on your phone or behind a laptop. It is also going out there, facing the other. So the problem is dealing with the other. And I'm afraid that across the board, not just the Congress, but even the Aam Aadmi Party that claims to be in a socialist space, what did they do to get the attention of the people? They got Ramdev involved, they got Jaggi Vasudev involved. So everyone gets gurus. You rent the followers of the gurus, and that's how you win an election. We have to stop working towards winning elections, and we have to start rebuilding the completely broken democracy that only thrives on fantasies of violence, because that is easy to do in 180 characters. Actual conversations are much harder and cannot be done in tweets.
Can facts be these tweets? I mean...
Can facts be the tweets? And the fact is that violence is being normalized. And from my point of view, the reason why violence is normalized and legitimized in our society is because the state is violent. And I believe that state action has repeatedly caused violence in our society. But that, of course, is a different conversation. But we're talking here about the terrible time of majoritarian violence we're living in and this deep threat that Muslims face. Thank you for your extremely insightful and moving and very passionate accounts. Let's now turn it over to the audience. Can you tell me whose hand was up first? Yours. Yes, go ahead. You're the one, you're standing up. Yeah. No, I beg your pardon, the gentleman. No opinions. Please don't give an opinion. Ask a question.
I'm a veteran from Indian Army, served 40 years.
Please what's your question?
Something known as MMG, Sarv Dharm Sthal, Mandir, Masjid, Gurudwara.
What's your question?
The question is, in Army, even Maulviji performs puja and other vice versa. There is a normal way of wishing. Eid ki Ram Ram Saab.
So what is your
Why
question?
can't India be like Indian Army? That is my
Should
question.
India be Indian Army, Harsh?
A lot of India is still, you go, you'll find people worship. Hindus have done more to protect dargahs in Gujarat than the Muslims have. But the army itself is also getting communalized today. And I think that it's a battle, that these partitions of the heart affect people even in the army, outside the army. We all have to fight. पहले अपने से लड़ना होगा, फिर अपनों से लड़ना होगा, और तभी हम तैयार होंगे कि हम बाकियों से लड़ पाएं.
Okay, the lady here.
We've talked about religious divisions, but what are your views on caste appeasement? And
You know, we're going to have to hold on that one, because here we're talking about faith and we're talking about religious and we're talking about majoritarian violence. So we're going to have to hold on that one, because I believe there's a... Okay, go ahead, sir.
This question is addressed to Salman ji as a Supreme Court advocate, not as a politician, from a ordinary citizen. According to the Constitution, we are secular. But in government of Rajasthan, there is a provision for sending some faith people to religious places by flights, senior citizens. I am an atheist, and why atheist cannot be said, number one. Number two, why the government should spend money on religious festivals? It is okay, law and order is okay. But why the government should spend money for politicians and others going religious rituals?
The state sponsor religious festivals.
Well, Indian secularism includes religions. All it says is not that the state will be without religion, but it will treat all religions equally. Now, the trouble about an atheist is, where would you like to go? I mean, I'm sure that, well, wherever there is the center of atheism, or the god of atheism, as it were, we can certainly send you there. But just tell us where you have to go.
Okay.
And I hope their flights could take you there.
Okay. The gentleman there in the cap. Yes, you've been very enthusiastic. No, sir, 1 minute, 1 second, please.
मुझे सलमान सर से एक बात क्लियर करनी है. आपने यही कहा था ना कि कांग्रेस जो है मुस्लिम विक्टिम्स के पास इसलिए नहीं जाती है क्योंकि जो दूसरा वोटर से, हिंदू वोटर से, वो नाराज हो जाएगा. यही था?
नहीं, देखिए, जाति है नहीं जाति की बात नहीं है. जब आपको एक रणनीति बनानी होती है कि दूसरा आपकी हर बात को, हर कदम को एक्सप्लॉइट ना करे, तो आपको थोड़ा सा कॉशियसली, केयरफुली करना होता है. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि आपके पास हमदर्दी नहीं है या सहानुभूति नहीं है या आपको चिंता नहीं है, वो सब है. लेकिन समय को देखते हुए कभी कभी समय का तकाजा ये कहता है कहाँ क्या कहना है, कहाँ क्या करना है. इसमें आपका सहयोग चाहिए है, क्योंकि समय को बदलना मुश्किल होता है, लेकिन समय को बदलने के लिए आपका सहयोग मिलेगा, अंडरस्टैंडिंग मिलेगी, तो हम अवश्य करेंगे. कमिटमेंट पर आप सवाल मत लगाइएगा, हमारा कमिटमेंट मजबूत है.
Can I just say one thing, that I think the Congress is acting, and many of the opposition parties are acting on a belief that every Hindu has got radicalized, that India is already a communalized Hindu country. I think they're being extremely unfair on large majority of the Hindus who are not communalized, and therefore they will not be offended if you stand with a victim of violence.
The lady.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to ask why we are politicizing an issue wherein every Indian has the propensity to create a secular narrative for himself, wherein everyone has the capacity or tendency to believe and tap into their own rationale. We aren't from the prehistoric times anymore. We are educated one. I am a Muslim. I'm standing here. I have been given a platform. But notwithstanding, with the people who are secular, who are coming from, Hindu background, but it doesn't mean that we really have to politicize. I was lucky enough to stand with the people who could give me that platform, and rather I share the belief. So why politicize it? Why BJP versus Congress? Why it can't be humanity basis?
Well, I think the only answer is that politicians politicize hate because it gets them votes, and it's the easiest way to get them votes, unfortunately.
The gentleman is waving his hand from the last 3 minutes. Yeah.
Ma'am, you just said victimization of one particular community. I hope here people would have not traveled from Agartala to Karimganj to Silchar or to Guwahati. Ma'am, I just tell you, if you can, I challenge for anybody that if CRPF army is removed from that area, even with the local police.
What is your question? What is your question?
I'm just saying, one particular community per person may not cross. So then once you realize how the victimization is taking place in various parts of country, we just sitting in the metros or A class or B class city, keep thinking, making policy, but on ground reality, things are different. Go to Assam interior. Go to Agartala interior. Things are different.
I will tell you that the ground reality I have spent with people in the mob in villages. I haven't sat in metros in cities. And the phrase that the right wing loves to use against liberals, AC wale people, I'm sorry, that doesn't describe me at all.
And I have traveled to the interiors of Assam. In fact, I keep going there and to many other places. I believe the ordinary Indian still knows how to live together with peace. Let the politicians not generate hate.
So I have also covered the border areas. Believe me, the poor people who are coming across for work. They're coming across because many of them are destitute. We have to appreciate that at the end of the day, it's about economic opportunity and it's about incomes that people are coming across. They're not coming across because they're evil people of a single community. So I think that is a myth that you have. I think that once the economic benefits of the area reach, in the same way, the migration will stop. So I don't think it's about community or it's about religion or it's about race. It's about economic opportunities that those people are seeking, and they deserve sympathy and empathy as people who have had to leave their homes and come to a different place to get 3 square meals a day. So no protection. Go ahead.
नमस्कार. ये हम लोग इतना सारा आप लोग डिस्कस किया, मैं एग्री करती हूँ, लेकिन ये हम राजस्थान का, अलवर का मर्डर इतना डिस्कस करते हैं, लेकिन कश्मीर और केरला का बिल्कुल डिस्कस नहीं हुआ. वहाँ से इतने सारे लोगों को भगा दिया, क्या वहाँ इंसानियत नहीं है? वहाँ के बारे में बिल्कुल डिस्कस नहीं हुआ. और ये सिर्फ केवल कांग्रेस के अलावा कोई पार्टी कभी नहीं आती है यहाँ. बाकी के लोगों का ओपिनियन लेना क्या जरूरी नहीं रहता है? Why we discuss always Congress?
Okay. You've made your point. Okay. You've made your. Okay. Kindly calm down. Please calm down. Please don't shout. No. There will be no. If you shout, there cannot. If you keep shouting, there can be no discussion. Please do not shout. Please address the question of Kashmiri Pandits and the manner in which they're forced to leave.
Are we living in a country where we want one genocide to equal another and say people of Pandits there was a genocide against the Hindu Pandits, so therefore the genocide against Gujarat or the Sikh riots is justified? Are we playing genocide here?
Well, now you know.
It is precisely this hatred, sir.
Now you know.
Sir, you will not shout in that way. Please sit down. Please do not shout.
Sir, with all due respect, it is precisely this irrational hatred that we need to counter. Muslims are Indians. Muslims are human beings. They're good Muslims. They're bad Muslims. They're good Hindus. They're bad Hindus. Please let us not communalize.
Please stop shouting.
Do you know why I was saying we have to strategize? Because democracy without strategy doesn't work. That's the reason why I was saying.
I don't think that kind of strategizing and appeasement works
will ever satisfy him.
Okay, one second. Sir, if you continue to shout, I'm afraid there can be no discussion. Please calm down. The lady here.
Hi, I'm Shaista. I come from Madhya Pradesh and I'm a teacher. After what has happened right now, as a teacher for the past 8 years, I feel that theology is a subject which should be taught in schools and colleges because people don't even know what the meaning of a religion is. I mean, it is happening in the UK. Children know, like, if I'm a Hindu or if I'm a Muslim, people don't know about religion, and especially the youth. today they feel, I don't want to be a Hindu, I don't want to be a Muslim, I don't want to go to the temple or the mosque, I'll stay at home, I'll be a good human being. But I think it should be a part of the curriculum.
That's a very good question. I think, as a gentleman said, maybe atheism is the only way out for all of us.
I mean, it should be known.
Let me put to Harsh this point, because again, we spoke about it earlier, that is Hinduism about hate? Is Hinduism about finding an enemy? Is Hinduism about violence? What is this political Hinduism, this political Hindutva that has taken hold of us? Hinduism does not teach hate. That's to you.
See, Hinduism and Hindutva are two very different things, just as Islamicism is very different from Islam. Islam is a religion of peace and equality. Islamicism has led to a lot of violence. Hindutva is... can I answer with, because we have limited time. The two people who contributed most to the idea of secular India and sacrificed the most, Maulana Azad and Mahatma Gandhi, were deeply religious people, devout in their own faiths, and therefore they gave everything for the rights of people of every other religion. The two people who fought most for a religious state, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was not a practicing Muslim most of his life, and Savarkar was actually a self-professed atheist. So fighting politics, religion as politics and religion as practice are very, very different things.
We have, you've been raising your hand, yeah. No, he's been raising his hand here.
I thank you very much for excellently conducting all the sessions I have attended. You are
accidentally.
You are very weak in build, but very strong in your
Prime
views.
Minister, accidental politicians, accidental.
Am I another? You see, the Congress has gone down the day Shah Banu's case was मतलब शाह बानू का केस जब से हुआ है कांग्रेस गॉन डाउन हो गई है.
Just now, but I think let me just put that to Salman Khurshid. You've written about the Shah Banu case. Why do you believe that the Congress was unfairly accused of appeasement in the Shah Banu? No, but I'm addressing that question. I'm addressing that question, sir. I am addressing the question. Did the Congress party let down the Muslim woman, the poor Muslim woman Shah Banu, in overturning that judgment?
Well, I just hope that people would read the facts of Shah Banu. You may agree or disagree. It's in my book. The issue there simply was, how do you compensate or how do you help a woman who is divorced, a Muslim woman who is divorced? Do you do it through Section 125 of the CRPC, or you do it through another procedure? All that the Congress did was to say, we will make a separate legislation for Muslim women. They don't have to subscribe to Criminal Procedure Code of 125, Section 125, where the total amount of money you could get was 500 rupees. No, I know it's a... I know, but the question of principle, the question of principle is spelled as PLE, not PAL.
Very well said. I think that brings this very hot and heated and lively discussion to an end. I'm very grateful that you voiced your opinions in such a free and frank manner. Thank you very much to our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would like to thank our wonderful panelists and Aga Khan Foundation for this enriching session.